Good morning. Today we'll be providing you with preliminary information, including some details of what led up to the officer-involved shooting and the death of Demetrius Stanley on May 31st on the 1100 block of Tofts Drive in San Jose. Before I begin, I would like to say that any loss of life is tragic, and my thoughts and prayers are with the Stanley family and our community during this time. The investigation that led to the Tofts Drive officers on that evening of May 31st was an armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon incident that had occurred in March on that same street. On March 12, 2021, an incident occurred between Stanley and another person stemming from a road rage incident, and that incident was captured on video by an uninvolved witness. During an exchange outside of their vehicles, Stanley approached the other driver, who was a juvenile. While holding a handgun with a laser sight on it, Stanley pointed the handgun at the juvenile victim, who had his hands held up over his head. Video evidence shows that the red dot from the laser sight was on the juvenile victim's head. Stanley then entered the victim's vehicle, rummaged through the center console, and took a replica handgun from the victim's vehicle. This act of taking the property at gunpoint turned this incident into an armed robbery. Robbery detectives using witness video were able to identify Stanley as the individual responsible in this robbery incident. A warrant for armed robbery was issued for Stanley's arrest. Detectives also placed information into our law enforcement database, directing officers to stop and seize the car Stanley drove during the robbery if it were encountered. On March 26th, deputies with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office observed Stanley driving the vehicle used in this incident. Deputies initiated a traffic stop and took Stanley into custody based on the robbery warrant. The vehicle was impounded by our department, and San Jose detectives responded and interviewed Stanley regarding this incident. During the interview, Stanley admitted to the armed robbery. He also told detectives that during the robbery, he had been armed with a replica firearm. The replica firearm he described did not match the description of the gun he used during the incident. Detectives also learned that he was a prohibited person by possessing any firearms due to a prior domestic violence incident. Stanley was booked in the county jail and bailed out the same day. Detectives then obtained a search warrant and searched Stanley's vehicle, and in the vehicle located a Springfield 9mm pistol with a red laser attachment and a black ski mask inside the vehicle. The handgun with the laser sight matched the gun used in the robbery investigation. After the pistol was located during the search of Stanley's car, detectives consulted with the district attorney's office, who filed criminal complaint charges against Stanley that resulted in the issuance of a new arrest warrant. The new warrant included additional charges of assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a firearm by a prohibited person. On the night of the officer-involved shooting, 2 undercover detectives were conducting follow-up in plain clothes to confirm details of Stanley's residence and whereabouts. One plainclothes officer was walking on foot on Tofts Drive when Stanley came out of his house and began walking towards them while holding a handgun. The officer heard the sound of a handgun being racked and loaded. The officer then ran away from Stanley as fast as he could in order to avoid a confrontation. Stanley stopped, then tucked the firearm into his shorts and walked back towards his residence. As Stanley walked back towards his house, he passed an unmarked vehicle where a second plainclothes officer was seated. The officer knew Stanley was armed and did not attempt to exit the vehicle or confront him. Stanley initially walked past the vehicle with his gun tucked in his shorts. He then walked directly back towards the officer's vehicle. Stanley pulled out his gun using one hand and opened the officer's driver's door with the other. Evidence shows Stanley pointing the handgun directly at the officer. Fearing for his life, the officer fired his weapon at Stanley. As with all officer-involved incidents or officer-involved shootings, we will be releasing a community briefing video in the coming weeks as directed and dictated by recent legislation, Assembly Bill 748. The handgun recovered at the scene on the night of the shooting was a 9mm unregistered, non-serialized ghost gun with an illegal high-capacity extended magazine. The handgun was loaded with one round in the chamber and multiple rounds in the magazine. The undercover officers involved in the incident were not wearing body cameras due to the non-enforcement nature of their assignment that evening. There was no plan to arrest or make contact with Stanley or to take any enforcement action whatsoever. When our covert officers engage in apprehension and enforcement efforts, our policy dictates that the body-worn camera will be used. This is a traumatic incident for the family of Demetrius Stanley, for all the involved officers, and for our community. Our officers did not want or anticipate a confrontation that night and did everything possible to avoid having one. Unfortunately, the officers have no control over the actions of others. The determination of this shooting was lawful and just. The determination of whether this shooting was lawful and justified will come from the District Attorney. A joint criminal investigation by the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, the San Jose Police Department's Homicide Unit, is currently underway. The case is being monitored by the San Jose Police Department's Internal Affairs Unit, the City Attorney's Office, and the Office of the Independent Police Auditor. The involved officer has 14 years of experience and has been placed on routine administrative leave. And due to the officer's assignments and their safety in that assignment, we will not be releasing the officer's name at this time.